Hi, I'm Rick Reese, the Managing Director here at Sea Island. It was a tremendous honor when we were chosen as the site of the 2004 G-8 Summit hosted by President George W. Bush. We thought it'd be a lot of fun to hear some of the stories of our employees who were here at the time. I hope you enjoy.
The initial discussions about the G8 Summit occurred between Rob Portman, Joe Hagan, and myself. And Joe Hagan happened to mention that President Bush was beginning the process of looking for a site to host the G8 Summit, and would we be interested? I said, oh, sure we'd be interested. And he kind of looks at me and he says, are you sure? And I said, yes, I'm sure, not knowing exactly the magnitude of the event. We had a lot of things, I think, going for us. One of them was the fact that we're on a secluded island, relatively secluded island, something that could be relatively easily secured. I remember being asked to meet a delegation at the lodge on a Saturday morning, about 8:30, and I get there and this busload of folks from Washington shows up, and there's clearly a leader, a tall guy with a hat and a trench coat and a briefcase, and he comes walking over to me and he says, are you Bill Jones? And I said, yes, sir. He said, we need 5,000 hotel rooms and ramp space for 23 747s. And I said, that's no problem. I had no clue if that was a problem or not, but clearly that was the right answer, and somebody on that list was gonna say they could do it, and I figured we could do it.
This area, for something like that to happen, it was just like, it was surreal.
The Secret Service is pretty much in charge of everything.
Patriot missile battery on the airport runway, Huey helicopters flying all over the place.
And overhead, you can see the F-15 fighter jets overhead circling.
At any time you stepped out of the barriers, the little tape thing that they, like 5 minutes ago you was allowed in this area, when you come back, this area is roped up in a different color thing. You was not allowed to go in there. You had to go make a circle, and you had to be rescanned all over again.
Most people that come to work don't come to work and drive down a causeway that has fences and military and the Green Berets, at your, they're kind of like your welcome mat, if you will.
To understand the magnitude, particularly from a security standpoint, I was asked shortly before the summit to participate in an evacuation exercise. And this was something that the administration took very seriously. And the exercise was assumed that the world leaders had to be evacuated, and they could not be evacuated by air. So there were 8 of us, and it was mostly White House staff. We were told to be at the beach club at about 8:30 in the morning, and to wear like gym shorts, a windbreaker, and tennis shoes. So the 8 of us show up, and immediately 2 SEAL teams divide us into groups, 2 groups of 4, rush us down to the water. They throw 4 of us in one rubber, kind of camouflage rubber craft, and 4 in another craft, identical craft. We immediately race 1.5 miles offshore, without stopping, launch onto the back of 2 85-foot jet boats, again manned with SEAL teams. The SEALs grab us, strap us into hydraulic chairs, and we race 15 miles offshore. Now, if you know anything about the topography, 15 miles offshore is just over the curve of the earth. You can't see it from Sea Island. Well, as we approach that point, we realize the aircraft carrier, the Iwo Jima, is out there with its entire battle fleet. And we go straight into the back of this carrier and offload into the carrier, and there are all these surgical suites and nuclear decontamination booths, and at that point you realize, this is really a pretty incredible event.
I would venture to say during the summit this was probably the most secure place in the world.
A lot of surprises came about from the standpoint of, we worked with the White House social director. We had a tent that we made look like a full restaurant for the media. And we served 500 people for each meal period. So we would serve, on average, somewhere between 2,500 people per day.
And we had to build all temporary kitchens, all temporary dining facilities, stewarding system, everything.
And the food was actually watched from the fields until it got here onto property. So everything was brought here and it was contained on property and stored. And then you had all the FDA's people running around with their thermometers, and they were checking to make sure temperatures stayed where they needed to be.
The Algerian contingent, they would be wearing tuxes Anytime I would go to the room, it was extremely hot in there. It was in June. They just didn't use the air conditioning. Seeing someone in a tux and sweating profusely like that, there was, I can recall, times when there was a goat cooked. And
if you know anything about the Russians, they like dealing in cash. So it was the situation where they would come to us and open up a briefcase and say, we want this done, take how much money you need.
Many piles of $100 bills.
I like the way the Germans come in style. They were always punctual, and they had all their Porsche Cayennes all flown in.
So this particular event was for lunch at Ocean Forest. I think there's a picture of it in this room somewhere. But so they sat down and were in casual conversation, and I think it was Jacques Chirac that asked, it'd be really great to have a cheeseburger. And so then the president was like, absolutely, and then they all started talking. So I think we did 4 or 5 cheeseburgers. And
I think that made international news was the aspect that President Chirac loved those cheeseburgers.
And then the Secret Service gentlemen came down the drive, and we packed them up in to-go boxes, and they whisked them off. They literally going like 100 miles an hour down the drive. It was just funny.
We even snuck some of those cheeseburgers to Barney. I don't know if you remember the Bush's dog, but Barney liked the cheeseburgers too.
But one of the things I think that everybody felt immediately was that sense of genuineness from people that have just grown up here in the South.
Of course, what President Bush was looking for was something that would show and showcase what America's all about, and nothing better than Southern hospitality.
The Russian agents, the security personnel, they did lots of shopping here. I mean, they had fun. They were buying toys like crazy that they have to send back home to their kids and whatnot.
We got a couple of interesting interactions with some of the diplomats, and one of those being called to give a lesson to the president of Yemen. They literally had 20 golf carts, so it looked like a train. Wherever he went, 19 other golf carts would follow him. He speaks no English, so I'm talking through one of his translators. And so it becomes obvious that they've never seen golf before. They don't even really know what it is. So he gets a club and immediately just starts swinging. Grabs it the wrong way and just all over the board. So I asked the handler, I said, well, can I touch his hands? I mean, how? And so he asked him, and he gives me permission to touch his hands. So I work with his grip and get his grip correct on the club, and then he starts swinging again. Well, his security detail obviously thought that they were supposed to go get the balls once he hit them. Guys start running out and getting these balls, and he just continues to hit. And so these balls are zooming right past his people, and they keep running and trying to grab them because they think they need to bring them back to him. And they don't speak English, so I can't really tell them. And so finally I'm thinking, well, somebody's going to get hurt here. So I stop the balls for a second and tell the translator, you got to get all the guys back. And about that time, the president of Yemen, I guess, had enough, so he hops in his cart and rides out into the range. The other 19 carts start following him. And the president of Yemen drove around the whole backside with 19 carts right behind him until he got back, went inside, and that's the last I ever saw of him.
I had asked Joe Hagan prior to the event, would the president like to play golf or go fishing, because I knew that he'd be here early for the event. And Joe said he'd probably want to go fishing. If he wants to go fishing, I'm going to have the captain race the boat to the north end of Sea Island and pick us up. So you've got to let the military and Secret Service know that this fast little fishing boat is going to be rapidly approaching Sea Island. Oh, no problem. We can handle it.
When I left the dock, it's a tiny little creek. So I came flying out of this little creek in a small flats boat, and the Coast Guard inflatable to my left was around the corner, and he was looking my way, so he didn't see me. So I came flying up behind the other one, probably about 30 yards away from him, and I waved to him. When I waved, they threw their sirens on, mounted their machine guns, flew out in front of me, cut me off, had me at gunpoint, made me get on my knees, screaming, "You're under arrest, you're in the red zone, how did you get here?"
So I show up, it's a very still, calm day. I show up at the dock, and the president's got one Secret Service agent with him and his dog Barney. And we're sitting there, and there's no boat, there's no sound, there's no Mike Kennedy, there's no anything. And I'm thinking, what are we going to do?
And literally within a minute, the chief of the Coast Guard came over in the Coast Guard helicopter. And he's yelling at the Coast Guard captain on the boat to get me out of the red zone, tow the boat out of here. Where did he come from? How did he breach security? And at this point, my cell phone's ringing nonstop.
And about that time, I hear this noise on the Secret Service radio, and the Secret Service agent steps off and handles whatever it was on the radio. And pretty soon, Mike Kennedy shows up, and he's white as a ghost.
When I pulled up at the dock, the president was there with Barney, his dog, and they just hopped on the boat. The Secret Service guy hopped on the boat, and Bill hopped on the boat. And it was a small boat. And what was really funny was the Secret Service gentleman leaned over when we were pulling away and said, "Do we have life jackets on the boat?" And I said, "Of course we do, but there's so many people around us. If he tried to jump off, I think someone would catch him before he hit the water." One neat thing, while we were fishing, there was a huge... it was a barge, and it was where all the Coast Guard guys were housed for break. It was like a floating hotel, basically. And he asked what it was, and I told him what it was. And he said, "Can you please take me over there, and I'd like to say hi to the guys." And they recognized him, and they all came running out in formation. There was probably 75 of them. And he gave them a 5-minute inspirational speech that was pretty incredible. I wish I remembered the details of it. They cheered and threw their hats up in the air. And at that point, we had one fish on the boat. And we gave it to him, and you heard over the loudspeaker, the presidential redfish is now on board for lunch, and it was a very neat experience.
Well, look, I was asked one time, how long did it take you to get the summit? And my response was 75 years, because everything we'd done in the past, hosting world leaders, hosting royalty, led to our ability to host the G8 summit and do it well.